this connection between Black folks and purple drinks may have been much older than we ever thought. So I'm gonna play you a jingle for one of those early grape drinks, a soda called New Grape.
I got a new grape, nice and fine. 3 rings around the bottle is a ginger wine. I got your ice cold new grape.
It's catchy.
It's catchy.
Who are these people?
So those are actually the New Grape twins.
I think there's like 6 known things recorded by them. 4 of them are hymns, and then 2 of them are about New Grape.
So it's like Jesus and jingles, basically. It's
Yeah,
like...
exactly.
Your ice cold new grape.
Hello. Welcome, everybody, to our podcast club. So you just heard a clip from the episode that we're going to be discussing. Before we dive in, I wanted to just give you a little background on Podcast Club. So it was started at the New York Times as an actual in-person group. We still meet every week and discuss one episode of one podcast every week. And it's basically like a book club, but for podcasts. And so I hope that when we get to this episode, you can all jump in and feel like this is your own book club for podcasts. We also have a Facebook group where every week we're discussing one episode as a group. Feel free to join if you haven't already. So now to the nod. Before we get to this week, to the episode that we're going to discuss, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who you guys are, how you came together to make this show. I feel like you have a meet cute. Do you?
We met at a party through a friend who we're still friends with. And
The 2 of them, I wasn't there.
yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we weren't exactly like that night. It was just like I thought Brittany was loud and we didn't really get a chance to like talk or build like that.
So you weren't like, we're having such amazing chemistry right now.
No.
People should hear this.
No.
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 I mean that was 12
Eric
years
used to
ago.
have a palm trio. There's actually a really good episode of a different podcast called Kismet about us meeting.
Yeah.
This guy, Bert Warshaw, he interviewed each of us separately and asked us to tell the story of the first time that we met, and he edited it together and it came out so great. But the name of that episode is Palm Trio because that was Eric's phone of choice at the time.
Yeah.
Eric was an RA and you worked at the mall.
I was insufferable.
Yeah, and it was so there was no place he had to be there wasn't Wi-Fi on phones. So it was not to my knowledge, I had a flip phone at that time. But yeah, Eric was all in his Palm Trio
with a stylus.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what I like to schedule things. It was a different time. I don't know what I had to schedule.
You still like to schedule things.
I still like to schedule things, but I mean it's a little easier. I have more purpose now. So it's just
So then how did you transition from this guy is too into his scheduling to deciding that you 2 should be on air together?
After I want to say my birthday 3 or 4 years ago at this point, we ended up a whole bunch of our friends ended up at a cigar bar. Cigar bars are great because you can bring your own alcohol and your own food, which we did. And so Eric and I were sitting actually in chairs probably not unlike this in front of a fireplace.
Yeah.
And we just talked for 4 hours uninterrupted.
Yeah, and it was a cool experience. It was one, Brittany and I, we always end up talking a lot. But this particular experience, we ended up talking just about so many different things and a surprisingly intense and poignant conversation too.
Yeah.
And after we had been looking for ways to more formalize us hanging out because I don't like to talk on the phone.
Eric does not like to talk on the
Were
phone.
you looking for ways to schedule it?
But yeah, so I was like, well, why don't we just make a podcast?
And I was like, no, we should not do that. I was like, Black people already have podcasts. It's called The Read.
Yeah.
We don't need another one. I was like, who even listens to this shit in the first place? And and then that from that conversation, we had a couple false starts with the podcast where we were we didn't realize that it took work to make.
Yes.
So we would say we're gonna meet up, we would drink beer. We would say we're gonna meet up, and you would be shopping
Yeah.
at Uniqlo buying pants, same as
Good
now.
pants.
Yeah, and then but then we maybe about 3 years ago we really started taking it seriously, and then we started for Color Nerds.
Okay. And did your names get said by someone? Do you guys know who everyone is? This is Brittany, this is Eric, and this is Sarah, who's the producer on the show.
Yes.
So there was no Sarah,
No,
right?
no.
Was it just the two of you?
Yeah, it's just us.
Yeah, so I mean, we like toiled over for Color Nerds for, I would say, probably like the first like 2 years.
First 2.5 years was us by ourselves.
Yeah, and then but after Brittany got hired at Gimlet, she produced Sampler, and that is where
I came in as Brittany's producer on Sampler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you went over to Gimlet
I also
too.
went over to. It's like a bit of like musical chairs.
Yeah.
In that. I started at Gimlet as well, and I worked on Undone and then Mogul.
And so would you say that like 4 Color Nerds plus Sampler plus Mogul plus Undone equals The Nod? Or how do they each kind of filter in?
Some other algebra in there, but
Yeah.
for the
What do
most
you
part-
subtract?
Yeah. I mean, it's well, you subtract most of the white people, I guess. But, but no, but I mean, it's for the most part, that's right. Like, but most of the team is from Sampler.
Yeah. There are white people on the team.
Yeah.
Shock.
And then you kind of add me in there and mix a little bit around, some purple stuff, and you got our team.
We wanted to take like a lot of like the fun conversations that we were having on for Color Nerds, where it was just like us talking back and forth. But we also both wanted, like, we realized that like for Color Nerds had become as mature as far as it being a show as it was going to get. We didn't have any more time. I think Eric lost his hair over the course of making the show
And
from the stress.
they were making for Colored Nerds while they were doing their other full-time
Right.
jobs at Gimlet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, which was
we'd go home on Friday night, they'd come in Saturday and do for Colored Nerds.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of work, and so we wanted to do storytelling. We still wanted to have be able to talk to each other. We wanted to bring other voices into. We wanted to not be working on 2 shows at one time, and also, but we still wanted to have the polish that we had, the polish of I guess the Gimlet polish that we had learned and acquired while working at Gimlet, and we wanted to tell really cool stories about Black people, and so that's a very simplified
It's brisk.
version of how that happened. But and then The Nod came out 3 months ago. Yeah.
And so when you go into the studio to record, how much has already been planned out or scripted, or is it kind of like purple stuff? Let's go. Let's see where this takes us.
It depends on the episode.
Yeah.
First of all, we have a few different styles of episode that we do. You might have something where it's a 2-way conversation with one of the hosts, and that's pretty much condensed for time and clarity and as is. And then you might have something that's a bigger production, like the episode we put out last week that Brittany reported, where she's been talking to people for months and doing interviews, and then Eric wasn't even in that one, and she just went in and recorded that. And then we have the episode that we're talking about today, which is some reporting that's been done, and then we do something that we like to call a dump, where we try, and a lot of Gimlet shows do this, but we sort of, a lot of Gimlet shows that have 2 hosts. We keep one of the hosts out of the loop, from the pitch process, if possible.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering.
Yeah, so we try, we'll be in the pitch meeting and we'll be like, okay, Brittany, step out for 5 minutes. And usually we're in a glass room and we're just waving at her to come back in, or Eric will do the same. And so as much as possible in those situations, we try to keep it a secret. So when Brittany came in for the Purple Stuff episode, she had no idea what we were talking about. She didn't know any of the reporting that Eric had done or anybody that he'd talked to. And so she really was surprised, and we really were pulling things out and showing them to her. And in that situation, it's not so much scripted as it is that you have sort of mapped out a plan of the beats of the story that you're going to tell each other.
Yeah. Right. By that point, you really have a handle on your reporting, your tape. It's all in there. So usually it comes out a lot more naturally when you're just all right, now tell it to this person.
Right. Well, we have a clip of you tasting some purple. It's clip 3, and I feel like it'll be good to listen to that knowing that this is all genuine, because that was something I was wondering.
Can I eat the Jolly Rancher?
Yeah, go for it.
I feel like a teenager right now.
It's good, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you notice about all these things?
They have the same essential flavor. They taste similar, but the smell to me is actually even more distinct. They all smelled the same. It was so weird.
It's interesting that you say that because like when I started going down this rabbit hole and like looking at the phenomenon of purple stuff, like the thing that really jumped out at me is that all grape flavored things have one thing in common. And it's that they all contain this chemical compound that, if I'm being honest, is very much a mouthful.
Methylenthranolate.
So let me try to say that. Methyl and anthranolite? Is that right?
Methylenthranolate.
Anthranolate. Okay, gotcha. I still say it wrong.
But that you really teed that up perfectly by starting with the smell, and you had no idea that that's where it was going.
No, I honestly, well, I just cook a lot. I think that's probably what it is. Yeah, I do cook a lot. And I think that when you get used to like tasting things all the time, you like start to like, you remember certain things. And I love grape flavored candy. I love it.
And when she said that, like literally, I turned. I was like, yes. I was like, oh shit, this is great.
We got it.
Well, so we that clip we heard you tasting some purple, and there's more tasting that happens in the episode. And Sarah, you had mentioned that you got some negative feedback to that.
Yeah, one of the reasons we picked this episode for today is because it's our most beloved and simultaneously most criticized episode.
Yeah.
So a lot of people really responded positively to the purple stuff. Although we get it, it's pronounced knee-high grape. We will not pronounce it knee-high grape again in the future. That was a note that we got. Thank you. But the second segment, which is called Peanut Butter History, a lot of people had a hard time listening to that. Like
so
actually hearing the mouth
Let's
noise.
open it up. Did anyone struggle with the mouth noise in this episode?
Oh, nice.
You
This
can-
is great.
Everyone was fine?
Here. Who liked it?
Made it feel kind of real, like I was in. Oh, I didn't realize to get a microphone. Well, the thing that I really enjoyed. No, I really enjoyed it. It made me feel like I was in the room with you guys. Like I instead of hearing you talk about tasting something, I was like experiencing it firsthand.
Cool. We need you more often on
Yeah.
Twitter. Like,
Anyone else? Because I learned only after you told me this that it's actually there's like a disorder where some people, or
Misophonia.
maybe not
Misophonia.
disorder, but yeah, it's a thing where
Yeah.
people can't listen to the sound of someone chewing or mouth
Yeah.
sounds.
You didn't
like
you
it.
didn't like it?
Yeah.
Oh, can we get a mic?
I was like, you can tell us about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
It's no
hear.
judgment. Yeah.
No.
Well, it's just that when I was, for one thing, the show was surprising, as the show surprises me, which I love. And when I was listening to it, I was like, I wasn't sure where I was going with this. So what are you going with the purple stuff? And this is gonna be a history lesson. I was, oh, cool. Okay, history lesson. Okay, got it. And then I was waiting for another history lesson, and then they brought the peanut butter into it. I was like, what is this? Like, you were just, it was messing with my head. Like, it was throwing me off the subject. So I was trying to listen to what you were saying about Florence.
Kennedy.
Thank you. But I was so busy like, and I was like, oh, stop. So yeah, it just threw me off. It threw me off. I think I would have loved to have the peanut butter thing like in a live show. I think would be funny. Like if you're doing a live show, is something that could be like because I've been to your panels before, and like maybe have some sort of quiz with all of them eating peanut butter or something like that. Would kind of liven it up. That would be a good thing to do then, but not on the show. It didn't work for me. Just listen to it now.
Yeah, that episode, that particular segment, people, like I was telling you earlier, like nobody's ever like, yeah, that episode was okay. Like, that was okay. Like, people are like, I hate it. Never do this again. Or I will stone you. Or they're like, when is the next one? Like, how come you haven't done this more often? And I'm just like, I don't know,
It's truly
man.
polarizing.
It's
There's
yeah,
no
it's
in between when it comes to peanut butter history.
polarizing.
Yeah.
And it's complicated. I mean, we obviously really liked the segment. We thought it was fun. It made you sick.
It made me
actually sick.
But you know what,
but
though? I realized I like peanut butter a lot more than I had realized. I started eating way more peanut butter after you did that.
yeah. But I mean, it was supposed to be a bit of a play for us. Like, it was supposed to be a bit of a play off of like drunk history, and we also liked the kind of the challenge and the spontaneity of the storytelling that happens then, because like we often have to go in a room and tell a story kind of from memory and like do it in a rough amount of time, but this was even more challenging because the time is pretty fairly set, and then on top of that you don't know how your own mouth is going to react to being stuffed with peanut butter.
No, and it's like also like you have no clue how much you have to, like I had to eat so much. And by the time we got to the very end, I spit out the last bite. I was like, I am done with this.
You
But
ate
also,
half a jar.
yeah, I ate like half a jar.
Yeah, it was
I
a-
can't believe
it was a lot.
yeah, I'm alive.
And you guys
Um,
had tried it out with other ideas, right?
Other
like peanut butter
substances?
sandwiches.
We did it. We like did a bunch of tests of that
Yeah.
particular segment. We first started out with peanut butter sandwiches, which was that made you sick.
I ate the peanut butter sandwiches, and I was not well. I was
Yeah.
really, really.
That
But that was
Yeah.
more of a gluten
Worse?
thing, I think.
Yeah.
That was a gluten thing.
I have
Oh.
a gluten sensitivity.
He also
Okay.
toasted
Okay.
his bread. He like did a whole dramatic thing.
You had glutinous bread?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really committed to the work.
These are the hardest working hosts in podcasts. They will destroy their bodies
Wow.
for the show. Brittany ate a lot of sugar on that purple stuff episode.
You did.
I did. I was actually I was like jittery after. I was like, there are a lot. Now I think we've done a lot of strange tests with food. There's stuff that we tried when we were working on pilot or something like that. That stuff that you guys will never hear that we sacrificed for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there other kind of little segments, rubrics like peanut butter history that you've tried out that either have or haven't stuck?
Surprisingly, most of the stuff ends up working. A lot of stuff that we've gone like the actually our I guess first or second episode, like the Beyonce Greetings My Brothers, that episode. That was a segment that we absolutely thought probably would not be used, or that we would have to do it again.
Yeah.
But
The whole Beyonce?
that
segment?
whole
Yeah.
thing
Oh.
was originally supposed to be a much shorter segment.
Yeah, like 10 minutes or something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
But we just
But there was
ended up,
so much to unpack.
yeah, we just ended up having fun, and so it was like, oh, actually, this is an episode.
yeah.
Let's try to make this
And
work.
Good for the Blacks is another one of our segments
Yeah.
that has
Yeah.
been successful, and people were like that, and those have turned into full episodes when we've had them.
I did not think ever the Good for the Blacks was going to be. That was literally just something where like you didn't want to talk about the Black Bachelorette. It was us and another one of our producers, Emmanuel. We were in the office late, and she and I were really excited about the fact that there was going to be a Black Bachelorette. And Eric was like, I don't care about this. I don't want to know anything. And then I was like, what if? And then now it's like a thing.
Yeah, that's probably the segment we've done most often. We have some more that will definitely come back.
We've taken that one abroad to Toronto, not very far.
Yeah, is that one always live? Or you've done some in the studio?
It has been so far. We're still a new show, so a lot of we did a version of that in studio that didn't work, and we took the same topic and used it at another live show, and it did work. But part of it is because we hadn't really framed the segment that well yet, and we didn't really know what it was going to be. And the thing is, like, you would think like, oh, it's pretty obvious to say like, let's use a framework of pros and cons, but until you get in there and do it, you don't know that it's just going to be this like free-flowing mess of a conversation that needs that around it. So we very much workshop ideas in the studio as well, and then obviously sometimes on the podcast with peanut butter history.
But there's more peanut butter history coming.
You have not heard the last of Peanut Butter History.
not heard
Sorry,
the last.
sorry, I apologize.
Yeah.
Well, you only have
We'll
one
flag it for
detractor
you.
Yeah.
in the room, it
Yeah.
looks like. Were there other things that stood out to people as either, that you wanted more of that or less of that, as in the case of peanut butter in the mouth? Anything? Yeah.
Anything about the show?
Yeah. Just about that episode or other episodes if you want to talk about others.
One of the devices that you use that I love. Sorry, one of the devices that you use that I love are when you have different conversations and they weave in and out. So when you were talking together about the purple stuff and then you brought in the expert historian and then you came back in, I found that to be a really, I don't know what it's called, but I think it's a really wonderful technique. Because you can almost feel like you're on this like a rambling journey in a car, and you're kind of like going from here and there and here and there, and you're going back and forth to the different conversations. I think really works well.
Yeah, that speaks to kind of what Sarah was mentioning, the dumps. Like it's nice because we end up having a conversation kind of independent about what's supposed to happen for the show, and just 9 times out of 10 that conversation is better and lines up actually fairly well with like the reporting and the tape that we want to use. And also usually it answers, like, we'll end up talking through and answering questions that we didn't know were kind of still outlying in the piece. But from talking through with someone who doesn't know anything about the story, they just come up, and it's a natural way to kind of work through that. I think there was.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not familiar with your podcast, and I was just wondering, what customer segment are you targeting? What is your goal in your podcast? And you people are like half white, and you're talking about this is a black program, and I don't really get it. And
Well, I'm not involved with making the program.
no, I mean those two people, they're not like.
Wait, who's half
Oh, this
white?
is fun. Yeah.
Wait, me?
I'm like, who said anything
Wait,
about being half white?
Wait, who's half white?
You both are.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
wh-
You gotta call my parents on that one because they would
Yeah, I was
be
about to say, there's a larger
confused. They would be
conversation there.
confused.
I mean, to give your question a bit more, I think, respect than it maybe deserves, I think in general, we make our show for people who are interested in and have an appreciation for Black culture. I think it's one of the, it's one of the largest cultural exports in our country. And so it makes sense to kind of celebrate and explore that.
How do you define that, though? I mean, how do you define your audience? You're not answering my question.
Wait, you're asking like what audience are we targeting? We're not necessarily targeting an audience. I mean, like, well, I don't know. I have a question that you don't have to answer, but like, I like wonder if like Radiolab was on stage, like if you would ask them the same question, But you don't have to answer that. It's fine. Yeah, what Eric was saying, like our show is for anybody who appreciates Black culture and a good story. Also people who like have friends, because he and I are best friends. So people who appreciate two friends talking to each other. But like, yeah, I mean, I don't think I understand, and I don't want to understand your comment about each of us being half white. I'm just going to leave that one. I'm just going to leave it where it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you haven't listened to the show yet, maybe you could listen, maybe learn something. But it's pretty much for anybody who appreciates Black culture and a good story.
Might also give you a bit more input into, like just who we are, what we're trying to do.
Okay, I think
Thank
we can
you.
move on. Thank you. So you said that you're best friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel like is that like sorry? Did you just reveal that for the first time?
No,
Have
no,
you guys
no.
talked about? Okay.
Cat's
Hopefully
out.
that's clear. That's
Cat's
part
out.
of it.
Do you feel like I can certainly tell listening how it's fun as a listener to hear like you as friends? Are there ever times where it's hard to co-host with a best friend?
Yeah.
Every day. No, seriously. Honestly, it's a pleasure to work with Brittany. That's probably one of the first times I've said that. But no, but seriously, it can be tough in that like you are so familiar. Like literally anytime Brittany opens her mouth, there's years of experience there.
And resentment. The resentment as well.
But it's also nice because like usually even in like pitch meetings, a lot of times we'll have to send Brittany out of the room, while I'm pitching something, and I will already know like, or I can at least guess, have some inclination about like, oh, this is a story Brittany will like, or this is a story we won't like, we should definitely do it.
That happens. That happens. We'll say Brittany will hate this. Absolutely greenlight it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes it easy.
They're like siblings. That's what their dynamic is like.
And so then what does that make you? Are you the mom?
I'm the mom.
No, you're not the mom. I think you're more like big sis. Like you kind of like keep things together.
Yeah.
But you're not like.
You don't do everything.
Yeah, I was
for
gonna say you don't have to
us,
do
so-
everything for us.
No.
No.
No, I don't.
Hopefully you mean that.
I'm just like behind the scenes pitting them against each other because it makes them work harder.
Oh,
The competition.
that does sound like
Yeah.
big sister.
Yeah.
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 She starts the fight.
I say I'm the mom because I'm much older than them.
You're not much of it. But okay.
She says that.
Brittany, I saw you at Pop-Up Magazine a long time ago, which was phenomenal.
Thank you.
And I know that you guys have done these live events where you do Good for the Blacks. How do you think about sort of what you've learned from live events and how that informs what you would do on the podcast, if anything?
First of all, let me say, Eric knows how I feel about live shows.
That's her favorite question
It's
to get.
I'm so glad you asked me. I love live shows. To me, it's like there is like something that we do sometimes with segments. We didn't say this earlier, but like we will test them out. So when we did Good for the Blacks, like at the first live show that we did here when we were like launching the show, that was like, we were kind of like, okay, we tested this in the studio. Didn't go well. Yeah. Let's try it in front of a room full of people. The thing about it though is you get that, and there's nothing like the feedback that you get. But like sometimes our editor, Annie Rose, who's in here, I don't know where she is, show yourself. Where'd she go?
She's in the back.
Oh, there she is back there. There she is. Annie Rose. She makes the magic happen. But yeah, it's basically like a live show is like an in-person edit. An edit is where we all like listen to a version of the episode and everyone types notes furiously and then gives the producer of that episode the notes and things that need to be changed and moved around or stricken from the script. And that's basically what a live show is it's like you have the immediate like feedback. Like it's like if nobody laughs, you should cut that. You know what I'm saying? Like, or if something drags, like a lot of times our live shows have two segments where the first is either like a condensed version of an episode we have that's upcoming or another segment that we haven't actually tried in studio yet that we just wanted to try in front of an audience and see what happens. And they're so helpful and so instructive as to like how to like make the show better. Also, I think too that obviously, like there are a lot of moments of like joy and spontaneity on the show, but it is still an edited product. And when you have a live show, like you can only edit so much as like how it was basically like recorded, more or less. Like you can't really change too much about it. You can't necessarily go do more reporting and add back to the conversation. So I think that I think that live shows offer something really unique for the people in the room, but also like I think that Eric and I are both like I think that we both come alive when we get to do a live show, and I think that like it, being able to have the audience see our chemistry and also the chemistry that we have with our guests, I think there's just something about it that I think like I don't know, there's like something about thinking on your feet and really planning to make a conversation as good as it can possibly be that like I think goes right back into like the in studio conversations that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, they're just fun. It's interesting because, like, Brittany loves them a lot. I love them as well. I just get really bad anxiety right before. So, like, usually right before, I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to go up there. This is going to break the show. And then when we get out there, I mean, kind of to Brittany's point, like, it's really natural. Like, the thing that we're most used to doing is talking to each other. So having that be some sort of component is really nice. It's not something I have to like practice or fake. So that's something we try to make sure comes through with the guests who we choose, and even just our general rapport with the audience. We try to make sure they understand like this is something that's like it's natural for us and it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see everybody because, so often we're just making this in the studios and we're in our own little world, and to actually like see the people that are listening to the show and hear the reaction to it, it's amazing. Like,
yeah. Do you ever do focus groups or anything like that?
No, I mean
or is
that's
the
kind
live
of
show.
That's pretty much the focus.
Twitter is a focus group.
Yeah.
Twitter is a focus group. Family members and friends are a focus group.
What are your family members think of the show?
Well, I mean,
it's a many splendored question.
Yeah, I was about to say my mom listens and she will send her the episodes to her friends. And so I know the ones that like she is really a big fan of because she'll come back and be like, my friends really like this. You did a good job. And so like those are kind of the barometer. But there are some episodes, like we did an episode on like sex, and like she said, this was good. And then the conversation ended, and I was kind of happy about that.
Yeah, so. My parents now listen to first of all, Eric and I have probably recorded some, I don't know, like, who knows, like 100, I probably recorded like 100 hours of like out in the universe, like audio content. My parents only started listening to anything that I made like 3 months ago. Oh. They were just sort of like, you call us every day, so what are we really doing? I'm like, y'all are retired, like you have nothing to do. You have no grandkids, like cut me some, like give me something. But yeah, so now my parents listen to it. What actually got them really to start is that other people would come up to them and they'd be like, I'm so proud of your daughter, she's so talented. Her podcasts are so good. Like, when is she coming to Detroit? Like, can they do a live show? And so my parents would be telling me, they'd be like, oh my God, like so-and-so says your show is so good. I'm like, can you find out for yourself. Like, it's available on Apple Podcasts or
anywhere you listen.
But yeah, no, They're really supportive. Even if they don't listen, they come to live shows. But now they listen and they tell. Now they like I know they listen because they give me facts in every conversation. They're like, "Oh yes, that reminds me of when you talked about the Apollo Theater in the episode that just came out last Monday." I was like, "Okay, cool." But yeah, no, yeah, they're pretty supportive. They're pretty supportive.
I have one sister that gives me notes almost every week. But what's really nice is when you get feedback. Like I had a cousin who texted me when Eric's episode about sending his daughter to an Afrocentric school came out, and I'm Muslim and North African background, and she was like, I just listened to this episode and I loved it because I thought about a lot of the same things when I was deciding whether or not to put my son into a private Islamic school, and like whether or not I would want them to teach him how to be Muslim and all. So I think when you and I get feedback like that from friends and cousins a lot, where it's like it's really nice because you see the universality in the stories that are being told from everybody.
Do you feel like I feel like when I started listening, like the first thing that I noticed was your chemistry, and then there's a lot of I mean, as your parents have noticed, facts. There's like things that you can learn, and then there's also things that you can kind of relate to. How do you think about the balance of all of those? Like, what do you want to be bringing people back every week?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think our episodes kind of always have quite a few components like that. Like our rapport is kind of like a constant. It mostly doesn't count, but usually there's some sort of topic and learning about that topic in some sort of way, where it's like history or more like purple stuff is more like facts, facts and history, I guess. And we usually start with the like kind of the general topic, the things that are surprising and that strike us about that thing, and that will usually inform the conversation between the two of us. And then the reporting actually tells you what the history lesson or the actual fact pattern that is going to be released is. And we try to let that go where it can, and then come back and pare it down if need be. But the thing about it is we try to make sure we honor, I guess, like how we feel about the topic. I really do actually like grape drinks. I really
I think that came across.
Yeah, I hope it does.
He found that soda like 3 days later flat, and he drank it.
He drank it. Still good. But there's that, and then I was, we were legitimately surprised by this history that we learned, that we found, the new grape twins. And so we wanted to put, that in there, and then even just like defining, kind of how to get into everything with like that Dave Chappelle clip. Like that's like that is like that's deep for us. I know most of that set by heart.
Well, that's like that, even like that, just that Dave Chappelle bit. Like there's typically something in every single episode that comes I guess like the point that emotionally starts the story for each of us, like whether the story is about us or something that we like or just something that we were interested in. Like there's always like basically like this nugget of like a spark of interest for us in like, we saw this thing and we were like, why? Or like, what is this? Or who is that? And like that sort of, that I guess like whether it's, what's the word I'm thinking of? Whether it's like the joy of, grape soda or grape drink or, what's the word I'm thinking of? What is it called when you look back at something fondly?
Nostalgia?
Yes, thank you. Like it's the nostalgia of grape drink, or like the episode that I did last week was about this woman who I came across her photo on a Google search and I became obsessed with her. Like there's always some sort of like emotional tie that I think that comes through the story. So like, there are facts they're reporting, and we will try to like find as much as we can, fact check everything, and then putting into like a meaningful order that will make sense to the listener. But also there's like this question that Annie Rose, our sis over there, is always trying to get us to answer, which is sort of like why should the listener be invested? And typically the listener is invested because you're invested. So it's like, okay, well, why do you care? And that's a question that we have to answer for ourselves and for the listener at every single point in the story.
And I always try, for example, to encourage Brittany and Eric to lean into what they know, because a lot of times your own personal experience can seem so obvious you don't even feel the need to articulate it to people. But the problem when there's not a lot of people of color represented in the media is that those experiences are not being articulated. So even if it's obvious to you, it is worth articulating because it is not obvious to somebody else and they can benefit from that knowledge. So like, you know, we'll be talking and we'll be like having a hard time with a script and trying to make it sound a certain way, and I'll be like, okay, well, why are we even talking about this? And then just informally we'll have a conversation about like, well, when I was a kid, this happened, or and it's like, yeah, that's the experience that you need to be like getting across here. You are also an expert in this thing, just having been who you are in this country growing up.
I have chills because you quoting yourself.
I just quoted myself, guys.
Sarah impression of all time.
Yeah, we got a question over there.
My question is, I feel like one of the reasons that we might not see a lot of conversations about things like a do-rag or purple stuff especially in like a public media space is because there's some things in Black culture are kind of like we talk about those things amongst ourselves, but in a public space you're not supposed to talk about them. And you all seem to have like totally overcome that fear. Like from the get, you were just like, not a thing, and we're just going in. But I guess my question is that a thing that y'all have ever struggled with, and do you have you struggled with that, like with any of these topics that you've covered?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that is Chandra Kumanika. He's one of the hosts of the Uncivil podcast at Gimlet.
Yeah. He was also in the Purple Stuff episode.
He's in the Purple Stuff episode.
I wasn't trying to put my...
This was not a plan.
This was not a plan. We didn't plant that question.
No, this isn't like the Wendy
I
Williams
didn't know,
show.
and I'm the one who pointed at it. So.
But I guess to answer your question, I mean, absolutely. Like the Afrocentric Schools episode, for example, was, I mean, that was one that gave me a lot of stress. Like not only...
Can you actually, because I heard some people like murmur as though they know and love it, but can you tell everybody a little bit more about that episode?
So that episode centered around kind of a conversation I had with my wife, and I have a daughter, her name is Eve, and she was nearing 2, and we had always set 2 for kind of the benchmark when we would put her in a more like formalized school setting. And she came to me and was like, oh, I want to put her in an Afrocentric school. And initially I kind of like, I found myself bristling at that and not like being sure that was something that I wanted to do. Which felt weird because, you know, I've been hosting a podcast about Black culture and that explores like history. And that was one that I had to really lean into because, you know, that's a conversation. It dealt with my own ignorance about a topic. The reality was I didn't know that much about Afrocentric schools. That was not a thing we had available to us in Memphis, where I grew up. And so I had to go into territory where I was like completely unaware and knew that I had feelings I had to even just figure out. And so to the prospect of doing that, you know, in a way that I would be sharing it with, you know, potentially the country was daunting and stressful, and I was stressed.
He was stressed
while we were putting it together, but I thought it was important because the reality is, you know, even though I wasn't familiar with Afrocentric schools, I knew that is a thing that that is important to a lot of people, and it was important to my wife. You know, and I felt it was important for me to, 1, understand how I felt to be able to communicate that clearly, and 2, to be able to kind of share this conversation that happens all the time in many different settings, you know, with other people, because at the end of the day, you want your kid to have the best education possible. And for many people of color, that conversation is a lot more complicated than just which school. It's how they educate. It's what do they receive. It's how they are perceived. You know, it's so many different factors. So anyway, I thought that conversation was important, and even if it made me look bad, at least initially, it felt significant to have. And you know, ultimately, I'm really happy with how it turned out. And we ended up. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't spoil, but check it out. It's a good episode. If you haven't.
No, there's an update. You should mention there's an
update.
Yeah.
And actually we, Carla and I, my wife and I, we sat down with Long and Short's Time, Hillary Frank, and they re-aired it, and we did like a little update on what's happened since it aired. So yeah.
So you can get the spoiler there.
Yeah, you can get the spoiler.
Yeah.
So because you guys are best friends, do you wait until you're like recording to have certain conversations? Like, or do you want to talk? Sorry. Like, do you want to talk and if something comes out like Beyonce's having twins and you really want to talk about it, and like, would you get on the phone with each other and have that conversation, or you know what I mean, or even something more serious, or would you wait until you're in the studio because you want it to feel like organic and natural rather than you know what I mean?
Our show doesn't really do a lot of like hot takes or like really current news stuff, so there's not really a risk of like something's happening and they just really want to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think
As much.
with Good for the Blacks, that's probably one of the spaces where we are, I guess, a little more like topical. And with that, we often will stop ourselves from like really going into it because, like today's episode is about Drake, and so we'll be like gearing up to talk about that.
Yeah, and then we stop ourselves.
And then we have to be like, I need to shut up
Yeah.
because we don't want to kind of spoil it.
But you guys did that on For Colored Nerds too.
Yeah.
We did. What we would do is we would only talk about something so much before it was time for us on Saturday to go. And like, or even like sometimes we would go, like some episodes of For Color Nerds were like about a movie that had come out. So we would go to see the movie together and then be like, okay, good night. No one does that. You don't go to the movie with your friend and then like you talk about it afterward. We're like, okay, great. See you tomorrow, and then we would like talk about it the next day. But yeah, we try to keep stuff from each other. The other thing is that like there's a lot of stuff. Sometimes I don't feel this way. But in reality, there are a lot of things that happen in our lives that have nothing to do with the show that we have to talk about. Eric gives me a lot of parenting advice. I
give everybody parenting advice.
He gives me a lot of parenting advice.
Question over there.
Yes. So the Cowboy West Village episode was probably one of like my favorite episodes of podcast ever that you guys that you did. And Eric, we love you, but Brittany, I feel like you did such a great job on that by yourself. Would you be willing to talk about what that experience was like for you?
Sure. Okay, so for those of you who haven't listened to it, there's this episode we have. It came out last Monday called "The Cowboy of the West Village." It is about Stormy Delavier. It's so hard because I'm mispronouncing her last name. She pronounces her last name differently than everybody else does, but it's her last name. So Stormy Delavier. She is this woman who was a famous drag performer in the like 40s, 50s, and 60s. She traveled in the 50s and 60s with an interracial drag troupe all around the country. They played some of the biggest. They played like Lowe's on 42nd Street. They played the Apollo. They played like the Chitlin Circuit, like a black theaters like throughout the South and along the Eastern Seaboard. Detroit, Cleveland, anywhere you can think of. And like this was like family entertainment. So like people would take their kids and it would be like a family thing. They all go on Sunday to the drag show in the afternoon. And it was really popular. I mean, these people were doing like 4 shows a day. So she did that. And then in 1969, a bunch of stuff happened to her. But basically there's this legend that she was the first person to throw the first punch at Stonewall. And which, you know, obviously changed the course of like, you know, American history forever. And then after that, she became like a bodyguard and basically like she would patrol the West Village and Chelsea going to gay and lesbian bars looking for people who were starting trouble. She packed heat. She had a gun. And like basically I was Googling one day looking for something for somebody else for a peanut butter history that never happened. And you know when you Google somebody, like they'll have like people also searched for and then like little photos come up. So I saw this photo of this person. It was like this pose like this. I look like a dumbass doing it, but she looked amazing. And it was this like slim black woman, pale skin, like white, like blonde, platinum blonde hair. And I was like, I don't know who this is, but I've never heard this person's name and I need to know everything about them. So then basically like that was just a lot of Googling, a lot of archival research, a lot of getting on the phone and talking to people and going out and talking to people and like watching old documentaries and stuff like that. I tried to learn as much as I possibly could about this woman's life. It's hard because she died in what year is it? It's 2017?
2014?
Yes, thank you. She died in 2014 at the age of 93. And she was born mixed race in Louisiana in 1920. And she was also masculine presenting and gay. And so, you know, as like her identity like has all of these intersections, the way that history works, her story wasn't necessarily super well recorded. And that like, so reporting that story was it was a joy and it was a privilege, but it was a challenge for sure. Because it's like, you know, this is somebody who wasn't issued a birth certificate when she was born. So like finding like a lot of accurate records and being able to piece things together, being able to talk to people and to be able to sort of like verify fact from legend while still also honoring the legend, because the legend is a part of the magic, you know? It was a lot of work, but I mean, you know, this is somebody who is like somebody who's contributed so much to not just like this country and not just like as a queer woman of color, as a Black woman, but like to New York City. Like if you talk to some people who are in their 60s and 70s or above who were hanging out here in like 60s, 70s, 80s, they remember her. After we published the story, there were, you know, people who wrote in like, oh, I used to go to Henrietta Hudson, this bar that she used to patrol. And I never looked twice at her. I had no clue that she had done all of these amazing things in her life. And it just, I don't know, it was one of those things that was it was like a pleasant but eerie kind of wake up call that there is Black history all around us. And if you don't know to ask or like think twice, then you could miss it, and your opportunity to record that person's history or to be able to like sort of have that door to the past is closed. So it was like I really enjoyed doing that story. I'm really proud of it. I'm glad that like people seem to be liking it. But it was so humbling. It was so humbling.
I think
it's really good.
I think that was like Brittany's version of Eric's Afrocentric Schools episode, where it was so important to her and she really wanted to get it right. And that's an example of something that changed, because originally we thought about getting into it with the show that she was part of, the Jewel Box Review, that played the circuit that Brittany mentioned. But, you know, in the end, it made more sense to focus on Stormy's life specifically. And so that's, you know, the process, editing over and over again.
Yeah, it was also cool, just like, it was like cool to make a story about somebody who like was whooping people's asses for justice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and it's also
great.
nice to not have to kind of manufacture a peg or anything. It's like just the fact that it's something that you're deeply interested in is enough reason to tell that story.
Yeah,
right?
we're very lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
We're given a lot of free reign to talk about a lot of really amazing stuff, but also a lot of really like just like, you know, random stuff that we saw on the internet.
Yeah.
Do you have any other? Yes, over here.
So people's reaction to you and your work can go left sometimes, especially on Twitter, but even in person from our departed friend over there.
Yeah.
And you handled that with grace and aplomb. That was like you took some like wild stuff and just swam right through it. Do you get a lot of like? Do people come to your work and like with good faith? And do you get a lot of like really outlandish attempts to like interact with you and like? You feel like people don't get what you're trying to do, or do you feel like people can like approach you reasonably?
Surprisingly, no. Like this is pretty. What just happened is pretty rare.
Yeah.
Though when we launched, I think we were prepared for it.
We were
So we were pleasantly surprised that it was not the case.
We had like so Sarah and I used to work on Sampler, which is a podcast about podcasts. RIP. It went away a year ago. Don't cry for me. But when I hosted that show, and we worked on that show, when we first just released a snippet just to be like, hey, a trailer, a show's coming, like we got email that weekend that was like racist as hell. So I was just like, oh, okay, well, if people are gonna be like, they're gonna hate the fact that this Black woman is hosting a podcast about podcasts, they're really gonna lose their shit when there's two Black people talking about Black stuff every week. And then it didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, there were people that called Sampler the Black podcast simply because it was hosted by a Black woman.
It was like no Black people on this show except for me. It's about podcasts.
And so we were, you know, we're putting out a show now that is expressly about Black culture. So we were very much anticipating that it was a possibility. But I think overwhelmingly it's been positive.
I mean, we were talking about this a little bit backstage. I feel like the same things that work against audio and make us need a podcast about podcasts in order to find audio, the things that make it hard to share and discover, also kind of keep like the internet hate away from it, because if you've taken all of the steps to like find this show, subscribe to this show, listen to it, you can't even skim it, you have to actually be listening. Like at that point, you're probably, if you're still there, you're into it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting too is We get so many, and we appreciate these reviews. We get so many reviews that are like, I didn't think I was going to be interested in your show. Or I didn't think your show was for me, but I listened to it and I really like it. And, I think one that speaks to, we're all different. And there's so many different experiences underneath the, umbrella of the Black experience, But those experiences can often be universal. And I think what people often, people might not think about is how am I in fact similar to someone who does not look like me or live like me, as opposed to how are the ways that we are different that might make me feel excluded. So I think when people actually listen to the show, even if maybe they came in I'm not gonna like this, and I've seen a few of those comments, usually by the end they're like, actually you did a good job, and I'm like, thanks.
Well, the thing about it is also Eric and I are reporting, which means that we have to go find facts and verify them about things that we previously did not know. So we, as expert Black people, we both have about 30 years in the game. If we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't know about before we learned it. So there can be value for you too. You know what I mean? It's not like we're coming in and just I don't know. I don't know what people think it's going to be which is, it's so odd to me that people are I didn't think this show was for me. And I'm like, and yet you are always asking me to recall old episodes of Friends. You know what I mean? I'm yeah, you assume that everything that is for white people is also for me. But yeah, no, it's kind of mind-boggling, that people that they have that sort of feeling still. It's okay to enjoy something that was made by people that don't look like you. But I'm overall, I've been really grateful for the response thus far to the show. So way less racist tweets, way less racist email. All good.
Yeah.
And is that any different than when you were doing For Colored Nerds?
For Colored Nerds was similar in that we actually didn't really get, we got a few crazy people who really reached out with some really kind of unfortunate
More requests though. We got a lot of people asking us hey, my wife and I are considering buying a home in a part of our city that has a lot of Black people in it. How do we not gentrify? Should we buy the house? I'm you're asking me if you should.
At that point, I'm not a homeowner. You're not a homeowner.
No. Have no advice.
Yeah. Stuff like that. Actually, a lot of I live in a Black neighborhood.
Yeah.
We get a lot of those comments.
Yeah.
But yeah, people will often, reach out what should I do about this? But it was actually, we rarely got any actual hate. It usually, when people actually listen to the show, whether it be For Colored Nerds or the Nod, I think people are often pleasantly surprised. I think a lot of it's just you haven't actually tried to engage with this at all, and usually that does enough of the work.
Yeah.
Any other remaining questions out there? Yeah.
Seems like.
I really enjoy the bonus episodes. And so I was wondering, maybe this is more for Sarah. How do you decide what becomes a bonus episode and what just doesn't get used at all?
Are you referring specifically to the bloopers or just any of the bonus?
Any of the bonus ones.
I mean, we've only put out a few so far, so there's not really a master plan. It started off the kind of reporting that we do on our show takes so much work that it's just not possible to be on a weekly cadence. And so, we have off weeks, but we're dedicated to our listeners, and we want people to have sort of that habit of being able to come back and listen to Brittany and Eric every week, even if it's not with the same full reported out edited process. And so just being around them and the conversations that they have all the time, it was a no-brainer that with our tracking, which is when they're just recording in studio, we would definitely have enough to have at least a bonus episode of outtakes every 3 weeks. We have since expanded it to do other things, and we'll continue to. They went to New Orleans recently, and they were came back and they're we have this crazy story, and so they're let's make it a bonus. But in terms of doing the bloopers, it's really easy. I usually just toss in a grenade of something that they're arguing about, and stand back and Eric really, really doesn't like saying people's names, so that also makes it really easy.
Yeah, I get really apprehensive about ruining people's names, and so
We've got complicated names on the nod.
There's a lot of complicated names, which is okay. Complicated names are good, but I just struggle saying them, and I am like very Southern, and like it just gets bad sometimes. And it was pleasant to hear a greatest hits of that all together.
But I think it's just like I said, our show is obviously more highly edited than For Colored Nerds was, but we still wanted to have a space where if you just wanted to like sort of live in the dynamic of Brittany and Eric without it having to be this full reported out piece, you'd still get a little bit of that. And I've worked with a lot of different people in radio. You cannot manufacture the dynamic that they have between them. It's so natural, and they are hilarious and smart and fun together. And so it's just sometimes you're in there and you're like, people would really want to hear this, and you turn it into a bunch.
See, whenever I hear that, I'm like, people really want to hear.
I don't know.
They're trying to slander me.
It's yeah. See, it's about to start now. Just about that.
I think there's one back here. Yeah.
I guess I have a little bit of a technical question. Your guest, Nadia, I think Bernstein, I don't want to ruin her last name. How did you find her? I think it was a perfect guest for the episode. Historian and specializes in artificial flavors. It just like requires a lot of research. How did you do that? Where did you find her?
She was the perfect guest. Literally someone who I would have thought never existed. But it was mostly like a lot of Googling and like Sarah and I were kind of talking, because this episode is actually kind of weird in that we normally have like a pitch process. Like we have structure, we have rules.
But this one was very early on when the show was still being developed, and we still didn't really know what our stories were going to be like.
Yeah.
So this one was cobbled together in a slightly different way.
Yeah, in that they were like, what do you want to do episodes on? I was like, I want to do an episode on Purple Drink.
Well, no, it really got started because we did, okay, so like the not even exists because after we ended Sampler, they were like, oh, you can do a show about anything you want, but you need to go through a very rigorous like 4-month piloting process and almost like cry all of your eyeballs out. And I was like, cool.
At which point I left and went on maternity leave.
Yeah, smart. I should have had a baby and then I could have avoided all this. So then, like we had to do like a pilot, like a little pilot, like 20 minutes or whatever. And then we also had to do a trailer that was like 3 minutes. So we had to make up fake stories for the trailer because the show didn't exist. So then you were like, you just went on a walk. You went on a walk with Chandrai.
Yeah.
And so this wasn't even a pitch thing. This was like, we need to make up some fake shit for this 90-second trailer. And then you went on a walk with Chandrai.
Yeah. So actually, this is good. So there was a clip in the trailer originally that was for a story that like I'm actually still kind of like loosely reporting. Hopefully it turns out. But I was like, I don't want to spoil this. Somebody's gonna take my idea and run with it. And so we were like, what else can we put in this time? And I wanted to like look into Purple Drink more. I had no idea what beyond I want to look into Purple Drink more meant. But I was like, oh, we could do this. 10 minutes? All right, Chandrai, let's go. Chandrai, it was like one of your first days. Yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh, there's a black man, let's go. But it turned out you were actually the perfect person to take that trip with. You know, Chandra's mom, works, I don't want to mess up her career, but partially as a nutritionist, and literally specifically studies like the way like black people's relationships to food and food marketing. And, we started talking about this. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I brought you with me. And then after we got back, after we used that tape, it was kind of like, well, do we actually want to try to do something with this idea? I was like, yes, I want to do an episode about Purple Drink. And then we literally were just working together, trying to Google around and find. And you actually discovered Nadia.
Yeah, and Eric had actually gone down a Google rabbit hole and found methylenthranilate, and I was looking up stuff about methylenthranilate, and I came across Nadia, and she's this like really delightful historian, and she's got a blog. If you liked her, she's got this really great blog where she writes about all kinds of food stuff. It's
really good.
Yeah, and she just was this like perfect Venn diagram of somebody who had the background but also was very interested in grapes specifically. And yeah, she was, and we didn't know what the story was, and the new Grape twins, all that, like we got that through her. Yeah. And when you talk about like the way that the production process evolves, We actually did do an interview with Chenjarai's mom for that episode, because one of the things that you didn't hear was Chenjarai telling Eric that he wasn't allowed to drink that stuff growing up. And because she was a nutritionist and knew better, he wasn't. And we did an interview with her, and it was great, but we weren't necessarily adding anything new to the conversation when we were saying this stuff is bad for people to drink, which is what a nutritionist is going to tell you. Yeah. We've heard that story before, and it's important, and we mentioned it, but we wanted to tell a story that you hadn't heard before, and so that's why the focus sort of changed. But originally we had Chenjarai, and we had his mom, and we had this bodega visit, and we had Nadia, and I think we were gonna go and track down all of these things, but then it just seemed like the simplest thing that emerged from that was actually the thing that people were most interested in hearing about and had not heard about before.
Yeah, there was the most surprise. Like, we just were able to kind of lean into her. I mean, as far as speaking to your question, I don't know the special combination of Google to make finding someone like her again possible.
I would use it every week.
Yeah,
if that was possible.
But in terms of once we found her, we found so much surprise and joy in the things that she knew. From her studies and research, that we were just like, this is it. Yeah, this is the episode.
But yeah, you just Google. You Google till you.
Well, so in terms of it being bad for you, we had a little confession booth outside to ask all of you what thing that you know is bad for you do you love anyway, and I think that we have some of those edited together, so we're going to play those to wrap everything up. But thank you guys so much. This is really fun. Awesome. Thank all of you for coming.
Thanks.
Champagne.
I think I should be slowing down on the times I go to speakeasies recently. Going there 3-4 times a week. 2 drinks every time. That's 10 to 14 drinks every week.
My not so guilty pleasure is hot Cheetos, which I eat with chopsticks because it keeps your fingers clean and your fingers never get dirty, so you can read or type or do anything else while you're eating them.
The thing that I refuse to quit, even though I know it's not the best, is gossip and gossiping, because gossip is fun.
Life is too short to not eat delicious things and chocolatey things.
I refuse to quit online shopping at work.
I refuse to quit social media or Netflix. I continue watching too late past my bedtime when I should really be getting good sleep.
I refuse to quit procrastinating. I have so many ideas that I want to take action on, and I just can't do it.
I would probably say the chip aisle. I go in just being like, this time I'm going to have the discipline just to look. That's it, the tortilla chip aisle. I can't quit.
Coffee after 4 p.m.
Alcohol, even though I've got a drink on me right now.
Believing sexy, dangerous women when they tell me I'm better than any other man they've ever been with.
Following Donald Trump on Twitter.
Continue to use the downstairs bathroom in the building where I work. Because it's the most private and I have a very shy bladder.
Sugar.
The classic stuff like ice cream, tortilla chips. There's several iPad games.
Scrolling social media obsessively, looking for people to argue with.
Being alone, not calling people. I'll help you quit social media if you hang out with me more often.
Deal.
Eating free food even when I'm not hungry.
Alcohol.
Biking on the streets of New York.
Frozen margaritas.
Eating peanut butter in excessive amounts straight from the jar.
Bagels. Lots and lots of bagels.
All right.
That was great.
I feel like we've gotten to know you all a lot better from that. All right, well, thank you guys.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Keep drinking the purple drink. It's out there.